Thank you, Nancy. As Nancy said, I'm the founder of the Asian American Women's Political Initiative, AAWPI, the country's only political leadership organization for AAPI women. And when I started it, a number of people in the community asked me, why just women? And so the conversations we're having here, this is why. So thank you to Justine, thank you to Steve, Talia, Farah, and Nancy for your leadership in pulling this together. And I just want to say how honored I am to be with you, with these incredible panelists in this incredible space that this cause has created for us to talk about API women in politics, API women in leadership, and API women in power. And particularly honored to be in conversation with you, State Senator Chang. I wanted to just get right into it. Could you just tell us a little bit about your story and your why you do the work?
Thank you so much, Cause, for inviting us to be part of this event. Exciting to be here. And thank you, Diana. So my name is Stephanie Chang. I am a daughter of Taiwanese American immigrants who came to this country looking for a better opportunity. I'm a mom of two little kids, two young daughters. I'm also a former community organizer. So before I ran for office, I worked for nonprofits doing organizing work around everything from affirmative action to criminal justice reform to voting rights and comprehensive immigration reform, and actually co-founded an Asian American civic engagement group in Michigan. And while I was in graduate school, I was encouraged to run for the state house. And so that was back in 2014. And it's been a whirlwind since. In 2014, I became the first Asian American woman elected to the Michigan legislature. And then since then, moved over from the House to the state Senate, where I also became the first woman senator to give birth while serving in the Senate, in the state Senate. So, and as far as my why, honestly, right now, my two young daughters are my little motivators. And, our country is just in such an important time in history right now. And, I just, oh my gosh, but I really think a lot about, the future that I want for them and what they deserve. And so they are my little motivators that keep me going.
Thank you. So you talk about, they say that women, they don't have necessarily stats for Asian American, but women have to be asked at least 7 times before they have to run, right? And I ran for Massachusetts State Senate, and it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, but it was scary, right? And so can you talk about sort of your decision and how you came to that decision to run?
Yeah. So, when I got approached, so I was approached by my then state representative, Rashida Tlaib, who's now a member of Congress. She was my friend. She was my state rep at the time. She was entering her last term in the state house because we have term limits in Michigan. And I'll be honest, like when she first asked me to run, I did not think she was serious. I pretty much laughed her off. And so that happened a couple times until later on. She's like, no, we need to have a serious
conversation. A couple of times, Stephanie. Is that you're saying? It happened a couple of times. Okay. Yeah. I thought she just kept making the same joke over and over again.
I don't know. It just wasn't sinking in. But then finally, we started having conversations about it, and I said I would think about it. And so over the course of 6 months, I had a lot of conversations with people about it. I shadowed her at the Capitol. I went back and forth between yes and no, a whole bunch of times. I had a lot of self-doubt about whether or not I was the right person, if I was old enough, if I had enough experience, if I knew enough about the issues. And then eventually I just realized, of course I should do this. This is a way to make a difference for the community that I love in a even bigger way and make a difference. So, and because I come from this organizing background, it kind of actually made a lot of sense in a way. So, and actually I remember someone saying, I'll continue to be an organizer. I'll just be organizing my colleagues and organizing community to push legislation. So, it really, that really helped to frame it for me as okay, this is something that I can do. So it did take me a good 6 months to make that decision. and a lot of self-reflection, a lot of conversations, but truly, grateful, because I think without that encouragement, especially from other women and women of color in particular, I wouldn't be here.
And look, I think part of the reason why we have this space and these spaces and are having this kind of panel is because, the theme of it is creating your own path. And so much, even just in your intro, you're like, the number of times you could say first, right? Because you were the first in so many spaces. Even when you ran again, you were the first again, right? So that is definitely, it doesn't feel like there's a lot. Doesn't feel like there's a game plan that is the same for us, right? That other people follow. So I guess what is your advice then to someone thinking about it as well, who's been asked, maybe thought it was a joke, and what is your advice to them as they look at this big scary thing? There's still very few, right? 1% of state legislators are AAPI women. We would literally need almost 4 times as many to have equal representation. So you're blazing a trail, but there's still so much more to go. So what do you say to the next generation of trailblazers?
Yeah, well, for me, I think this is what I tell a lot of women and women of color in particular, is to really think about, like, for so many of us who were already leading, who are already public servants in a way, already making change in the community. Public service and running for office is kind of an extension of that. And so I really try to remind people to look at what they've already done and recognizing the incredible skills and experiences that so many Asian American women already have had, and how valuable that is to bring to a state legislature or a city council or a school board or to Congress. We have an important voice. And I also think, with looking especially at this past couple of years, over this pandemic and this, obviously this pandemic, in addition, this huge rise in anti-Asian hate, and just a reckoning around racial justice in our country that is ongoing. But our voices are so important. And I think about the fact that literally, if I wasn't there, and if, Padma Kupa, who was the second Asian American woman in the Michigan legislature, if we weren't there, who would have been doing the things that we were doing? To organize a press conference around, making sure that people know, here's the hate crimes unit at the Attorney General's office calling Dana Nessel, our Attorney General, and saying, will you do this with us? Organizing town halls with the community, and providing information and being that link to state government, doing the resolutions to condemn anti-Asian hate. I actually don't know who would have been doing that. And so we play an important role, but also so many of us already had those skills and that leadership experience, even if you didn't even see yourself as a leader. If people are recognizing it and asking you to run, it's because they're recognizing that you are already leading in the community. And so this is an extension of that, and running for office is an incredible way to make a difference for the community that you love.
That's amazing. And, I think one of the things that I realized when I was working at the State House is, I'm in Massachusetts, and I started as a baby aide. That's what I call it, as baby aide. That's my first job out of college. And I just started recognizing that in these halls of power, we were completely invisible. And that was really reflected, as you said, in policy, right? So there was a whole year. And when I started State House, there were in Massachusetts, which now, thank God, we have like Michelle Wu and these incredible leaders. But back then we had 200 legislators, 0 Asian American legislators. I was one of the only staffers. And I remember a whole year when they did mental health legislation and there were no Asian Americans at the table, right? And we know that affects our community, particularly now. You're touching upon anti-Asian hate. And I think a lot of people think it's over, right? It didn't happen. I mean, I want to touch upon the fact that just this week, right? We had, we're filming this in California, for an audience, primarily people in California. There was a church shooting, right? places of worship. Again, there was a Dallas shooting of Korean women, right? Like at a hair salon, like places that are supposed to be sacred, for lack of a better word, where we're supposed to feel safe, right? But anti-Asian hate continues. And so why is it so important? I think you've already touched on it. For someone like you, right, who is very connected to community and understands that it continues while it fades away for a lot of people, right? The impact you're able to have, but also, what can people who are watching do who may not want to run for office, right? But like, how do you have an impact in this moment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple things. One, I kind of feel like it is super important to have Asian American representation, not just for the numbers, but again, it's like you said, to shape policy and also to be a link, right? Like I think that for so many Asian American community members, having someone that they know, like, okay, that person, I can call them and they will understand what's going on because they're Asian American too. And I just remember after the Atlanta shooting, a number of parents and professors and other people reaching out to say, why are our kids not learning Asian American history in schools? It was like, you're right. So then we worked with them and, put together a bill very similar to the Illinois Teach Act, and modeled after, so, but, to be that point of contact where people feel comfortable because there is that feeling of representation to reach out and to say, this is what we need. So I think that is super important. Obviously, I mean, people have their own representation, even if I'm not their state senator, that's fine. I'm here to serve and like partner up with other legislators too. And the sort of funny, well, I don't know, funny, but it's kind of like the weird thing about this. Actually, I represent a district that doesn't actually even have that many Asian Americans, but people still know that I'm there, right? And so I serve my district, but I also know that I have a huge responsibility of being the first Asian American woman in the legislature.
You make them feel seen. You make them feel comfortable. Yeah, please go ahead.
I definitely know that. And I know that because people have said it. And I also know it because people have like gotten involved either, on my campaigns or in my legislative office as interns where they might not have had those experiences if not for, me deciding to run. So I think that's really impactful. And, for people who are watching and feeling, it is a tough time right now, right? Like our country has been through a lot. Over obviously like a long time, but especially over the past couple of years, it's been a lot to deal with. And I think, sometimes it can feel really hopeless. But I think that we've got to remember, so for me, like part of what drives me is in addition to being a mom of these two young daughters who are amazing, one of them's walking around in the back here, and also, being a daughter of immigrants who came to this country believing in opportunity, like we have these values of opportunity and equity and access and justice. Those are things that are so worth fighting for. And so I know it can be really hard, but we've got to keep going because our future, our children are depending on us. And so we've got to just keep fighting for what they deserve. And I also feel a real sense of optimism because there has been such a surge in activism, just, you name it, from Black Lives Matter and all of the protests around police accountability to Asian Americans coming together after the spa shootings last year, to now, attacks on reproductive freedom that have been, decades in the making. But, that there's all these people who are feeling fired up and feeling engaged. And so on those days when it feels really hopeless, to remember to look around and realize we are not alone. We are actually on the right side of history, and that we are going to win because we just have this huge, momentum that may not always feel like it's there, but it is there, and we are going to keep just moving forward. And we need to achieve the goal, the vision of our country that, so many of our parents or our grandparents, came here believing in.
Okay, well, I don't know if there's a better way to end than that, like with a pep talk from State Senator Stephanie Choi. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for inspiring us with your words, and for giving us hope. It's a really hard time right now, right? But I think we are in a righteous fight, right? To be seen, to be heard, to have our voices heard, and we are just so grateful for your leadership, Senator Chang.
Thank you. Thanks so much.